I started J. Christopher in 1996, and I want to say the first vintage of Brooks was 98, although Jimi had lined up fruit to make in 97, but he got pissed at the grower in typical Jimi fashion. He's like, fuck all y'all, I'm not taking your grapes. And he wouldn't take it.
What impact did Brooks have while Jimi was running it?
Well, I think that the biggest thing, and actually I was kind of there with him on this, although I kind of walked away from the Riesling thing, but early on, Jimi and I, and Jimi more so than me, definitely, was very, very interested in Riesling. And we both started making Riesling, and he kind of kept going with it. And I focused more on Sauvignon Blanc. We were having better success with it in the markets, but Jimi was like, almost with Jimi also, I don't think it really mattered if he sold any. Jimi was just like, I'm not going to make Riesling, that's what I'm doing. And the other interesting thing that Jimi did is he was one of the first people to really pay attention to biodynamic farming. And I really learned about biodynamic farming just through what he was doing, which was really interesting, and then got us involved in it, although we're not certified here or anything like that, but we take a lot from the biodynamic playbook and apply it here, not only in the winery, but in the vineyard as well. And that directly came from him. And I think a lot of people, he wasn't the only person, but he was definitely a catalyst for that. So that was quite interesting.
Can you talk about the days sort of leading up to Jimi's death and then sort of the immediate aftermath, like from beginning to end as you remember it?
Well, there was nothing really that led up to it. I mean, it was so sudden and shocking. I remember vividly where I was at. I was coming down the stairs at my house on Alder Street in Portland, and Jim Anderson had called my wife Rhonda and obviously asked Rhonda if I was close by and wanted to make sure we all were ready. And he told us together. I was standing on the stairs. I'm amazed I didn't fall off the stairs, actually, because it was so shocking. Because if you knew Jimi, he was in perfect health. It was just shocking. It really was. Terrible, terrible news. Think about it a lot still, And then what happened afterwards was, we'd kind of thought, God, what's going to happen? He's got all this fruit sitting out there, and I guess it was Janie that organized this whole thing, And so all of us just took a little bit of fruit and made his wine for him that year. So, yeah. But yeah, it was a pretty amazing effort, and it was a great experience. We actually, just after it happened also, I had this wine sitting around and nothing to do with, and we bottled it and called it Cuvée Pascal and sold it to, what was the restaurant? I forget, it's gone now, but Tommy from Bunk Sandwiches was the chef there. We just took all the money and sent it to Janie to put into a college fund. I think a lot of people tried to do stuff like that. Because if you knew Jimi, Pascal was the center of his universe. He loved that kid. It was pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. So.
Why did you want to help?
Oh, it's not that I wanted to. It's just, I would have done anything at that point. I didn't even look at it as helping. It was just kind of like, oh, of course, it's my job. So, yeah.
Harvest.
Tearing up. Well, Jimmy's laughing at me right now, dumbass. What was I trying? Can you restate the question?
Sure. You're making wine for a friend, and you probably felt a little bit of pressure. So was there sort of what was your mindset as you were making his wine?
Actually, I didn't feel any pressure at all. I felt really calm about it. I just felt like I needed to do, it's not like I was going to make wine like he did, because I have no idea what he did. You can't really replicate someone else's touch. And so we just made the wine as best as we could as for ourselves, and just hoping that it was going to blend okay. And it was a little bit dicey because, you had, 10 of us or something like that, all making wines differently that somehow had to blend together. And so we just, I kind of thought about that, and because I described a little bit earlier about trying to look at it from a blending perspective, because it was all going to get blended together. And that's kind of how wines go together. You have different pieces with different qualities, high acidity, sweetness, roundness, tannin, things like that. And I kind of went after it that way. But really no pressure.
What's your favorite memory of Jimi?
Oh, God. Geez. It's really hard to pick one memory, really. But we used to go, this was back when I was a much less busy person, and we used to go mushroom hunting. It was great because we were waiting for harvest and it would rain, which doesn't really happen anymore. It never rains anymore. But Jimi knew these great, chanterelle areas in the Coast Range, and we'd go up chanterelling and we'd pick a 5-gallon bucket of chanterelles. It was amazing. And Jimi would always bring a rifle with a bayonet on it. It's like, what do you have that for? And he's like, oh, the bear poachers. I'm like, okay. And then actually one day we saw the bear poachers, and he was apparently he was concerned about the dogs that they send after the bears. But we did once run into this woman in a pickup truck with about 5 dogs in the back that looked like they hadn't been fed for like 2 years, and then I understood why he brought that with him. And then definitely the other great thing was just the early times hanging out, having dinner. I mean, that's what we did because we didn't make any money, so we cooked. He and Bojana and Pascal used to come to our house, our little tiny house on Washington Street, and I remember occasionally Bojana would have to get Pascal and take him in the car to drive him around the block 100 times, and I was always afraid that she was going to get lost off of 82nd Avenue and we'd never see them again. But she always made it back, and there was just so many great times. He was a great friend.
Why do you think the Jimi Brooks story resonates with so many people?
Well, I mean, Jimi himself was definitely a, force of nature and just great, very likable, interesting person. But the other part of it really is, it's amazing what happened to his little project, how it went from a very small thing when he passed to kind of this big thing, and, it's an amazing thing that he's been, memorialized or whatever. I don't know what the correct word is, the way that he's been, because, he was a very small producer. He didn't have his own vineyards. He didn't have a winery. He just kind of had this vision. And his sister Janie took it and ran with it, and a lot of people resonated with the story that, here was this guy that, he was like me. He had no formal training in winemaking, but he's very passionate about it. And I think that is the thing that resonated with a lot of people. For me, he was just a really great friend, and early on, he was my only close friend that had a similar interest in the business that we both chose to do. And so that made him an even closer friend, And I'm sure you're going to talk to everybody else that you talk to is going to have a similar story.